So I decided not to use the podium today. I decided just to wander freely. Like an organic chicken. I spent a lot of this week thinking about love. This is the way I do my topics. I think of the topic and I just wander the whole week in a daze thinking about what it means to me. I really shouldn't even be driving. Because I just have to wait. I just speak from my heart. I speak from what I think about it. And it just takes a long time to kind of sit there. And what I want to talk about today, and if anyone feels like throwing in a comment, say it. We're a small group. This is great. This maybe we should have more times when people say things. That would be wonderful. But I just want to talk to you today about what love feels like. The luminous, eternal, kind, and just the quality of what love is, of what love looks like and feels like when we show up every day as love. So bear with me as I just continue my musings in a more public setting than I usually am. One of the things that strikes me is that this community did a very loving and a very brave thing this week when we decided to take a new step, when we decided to step into our future and know that our new space is waiting for us. We declared our intention, for those who weren't here Wednesday, what we did is we declared our intention to be in our new home by the end of June. Fittingly, our first service is going to be Independence Day. Independence Day weekend, just like our nation did, who took a brave step in a new direction. We are doing exactly the same. It's a brave thing. It's a loving thing. Love has a quality of trust, of acceptance, of surrender, of hope, and of release. And aren't all those things part of what we are doing? Every single one of them. We're going to be sad to leave our space. I love this space. I'm sad to leave it. But one of the things we talked about on Wednesday, and one of the things which I know to be so true, is that this space, this building is not one world. We are one world. We are one world. The folks in this room, the folks who are part of our community who could not be here today, that group, that loving Sangha is who One World is. And that's the energy that we have here, and that's the energy that we are going to take to our new home. I'm thrilled at our new adventure. I think it is the true representation of what loving communities do, is bravely and together step into their next phase of journey. We're going to have a hug meeting after the service. I invite you to stay for that. We'll talk about that a little more. But as I was getting ready to talk about love, it seemed such a good time to do that. Our new series is going to talk about how we appear as light and as love in all the different phases of our lives. We're going to talk about fear. We're going to talk about suffering, uncertainty. A lot of those things you don't talk about in New Hope because we always talk about abundance and prosperity and all that great stuff. But we live very human lives. And we do suffer. We are afraid. We go through dark times. We're also going to talk about good things. We're going to talk about healing. We're going to talk about how we show up in love, in loving personal relationships. But I just want to examine, think of love as a diamond. I just want to examine the different facets of it. So we get a sense of how in every step in our lives we can show up as the loving essence of who we are. One of my favorite ministers, and I've mentioned her name before, is Ellen Davenport at Unity of Wimberley out in Texas, right outside, I guess it's right outside of Houston. And one of her favorite prayers is, if a door opens, I will walk through it. If a door opens, I will walk through it. Think about that. What wonderful, hopeful energy is that? She went on to say, I'm astonished how swiftly a door usually opens once I am willing. And here at One World, that's what we've done, collectively and individually. In recent weeks and months, we have communicated to the universe that we are willing. We are hopeful, we are willing, and we are open for our next step. We are willing to release with love this beautiful space where we have met for the past 4 years and step into our new home. When a door opens, I will walk through it. Living from a place of love involves living from a place of trust, openness, acceptance, and hope. And that's what we do. The goal of our spiritual practices is to live every moment, whatever's happening, in peace and love and harmony, regardless of the travails we encounter. We've talked in recent talks about how we are in the midst of change, how we look at change, how we look at transformation. Our new series is going to focus on how we establish and maintain the peaceful center that we all have in the midst of our very human lives. Every human life involves elements of fear, suffering, of uncertainty, of hope, and those are the topics that we're going to discuss in the upcoming series. There's a book that I brought with me, which I now don't have with me, but anyway, it's by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Howard Cutler. It's called The Art of Happiness. Has anybody seen that book? It's a wonderful book, and it's got this great picture of the Dalai Lama on the front. As I think about happiness and love and hope, he is such an inspiration to me. He was exiled from his country in 1959. The Tibetan people have lived under occupation ever since. But if you look at this guy, he is so happy, he is so full of joy, he is so full of laughter. He is so present. He makes everybody he talks to feel as though they are the only person in the room. When people ask him, what is the purpose of life? Who knows what he says? Yeah, exactly. He says the purpose of life is to be happy. Imagine, the purpose of life is to be happy. Now, by happiness, he doesn't mean transitory pleasure. He doesn't mean good feelings that come and go. He doesn't mean winning the lottery. Even wonderfully good things only give us a temporary lift. As a matter of fact, if you've ever read studies of lottery winners, no, sir, I represented a lottery winner once. He won like $4 million in the lottery. And his life completely went into the commode. Because all of a sudden he had so many friends, he had so many ex-wives, he had so much stuff. Everybody's walking around with their hands out. But what they found in studies of lottery winners is that after the lift of winning a whole bunch of money, you go back to where you were. You go back to your pre-winning happiness or unhappiness. You go back to the exact level of content or discontent that you had before. So what do we know about life? Good things happen, bad things happen, pretty much in equal measure. So when the Dalai Lama talks about happiness, he doesn't mean talking about having things go your way all the time. He's talking about deep inner peace and contentment. That solid center that stays with us, whether things are great or whether things are not great. Pain and pleasure happen in our lives probably in pretty equal measure. Don't you find that? Things are good. The only thing we know, when something's going well, it's going to change. When something's going badly, it's going to change. So, the Dalai Lama is talking about the inner peace that is attainable by all of us. Now, the way we do this, he says, is by training our minds. He calls it an inner discipline of training our minds. And by our minds, he refers to the Tibetan concept of Sen, which is S-E-M. And what that means is our psyches and our spirits. It's not our cognitive minds. It's our spirits. A daily practice of conscious training. Now, the wonderful thing about the Dalai Lama is everything is so simple with him. He says the way you attain happiness is by eliminating suffering. So what you do as you are engaged in your daily practices, you figure out what is causing you suffering, and you figure out what is causing you happiness, and you eliminate the stuff that is causing you suffering. What a great idea. I mean, think about it. I mean, I could be charging $100 for this. But yeah, really, 200, I like that. Thanks, Denise. But no, think about it. And haven't we been talking about that in recent talks? I mean, we have been talking when we've been thinking about transition and change. Last week we talked about limitations. Who remembers that? Please, somebody raise your hand. Oh, thank God. Okay, so we talked last week about the tapes we play in our minds, about the self-defeating limitations we impose on ourselves, the tapes we play, you're not enough, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not thin enough, your clothes don't fit, whatever. Those are sources of suffering. There's no other reason for them. So what the Dalai Lama would have us do is engage in practices saying, be aware of those things you tell yourself that limit you, that cause you suffering, and stop thinking them. Cool. Yeah, I mean, you just engage in a practice of telling yourself, I'm not going to do that. Those things are not true about me. I'm going to focus on the things that bring me happiness. Now, when you say happiness again, it's not pleasure. It's not going in. Now, for me, those of you who know me know that I love electronics. So for me, the source of pleasure is going to Fry's and buying something with an on-off switch. And a little pamphlet that I have to read. But because I'm so cool, I never read it. But what I've learned in very recent years is that that is a transitory pleasure. If I'm upset, and I gotta go to Fry's, I'm upset, something horrible just happened, it doesn't last. Other people do that. Okay, show of hands. People go to Fry's. Where else do you go? Any office products people here? I know we have clothes shoppers. We have shoe shoppers. Yes.
Antiques.
And then we have a professional organizer who has to help them get rid of it all.
Yeah. See, this is a perfect synergy. We just buy stuff and then we go see Melanie. This is great.
I enjoy returning also.
You enjoy returning stuff?
Yeah, returning stuff.
Do you really?
Yeah.
And that makes you happy again.
And you exchange new stuff?
Yeah, that money that I can trade it. No, I trade it for something else.
See, I never return stuff because I don't like going into stores. I mean, I don't like clothes shopping. I'm going to say this, but I don't want anyone to yell, I've noticed.
We'll just laugh loud, all right?
I really don't. Everything I have on now, somebody else has given me. I just hate clothes shopping because it doesn't have an on-off switch. But that's what we like. I mean, we seek transitory pleasures in kind of filling a hole that those things will not fill. Cindy?
The Buddhists think that a lot of suffering comes from attachment, being attached to things.
Yes, it does.
And that's, that's even what we're facing here, is we may have to go through something with our attachment to our facility.
Yeah.
But that also is, allow that to happen as we move through it. The more we're attached, the more suffering we have.
Well, yeah, I saw a great church sign. By the way, we're not going to post this because this is getting way too much fun. But one of the things, I saw a church sign the other day that said something like, change happens, misery is optional. Or something like that. Pain happens, suffering is optional. Growth happens, Jeannie, okay.
It's like change but something about growth, the suffering is optional.
Yeah, suffering is optional.
Yeah.
And that's true. I mean, look at the example of our building. I mean, we have attachment to this space. We love the space. We remember all the things we did here. I'm standing right here on the spot where my son Nick wrote his name. I mean, seriously. We have our names written on this floor. So that doesn't mean we need to stay. It just means that we need to love where we've been and release it with love. And move into our next adventure, doesn't it? One of the things we're going to do is before we leave here, we're going to have a ritual. We're going to have a ritual that embraces our being here, and whoever wants to help create it, let us know. That Jeannie's got her bowls, Melody's got it, Chris, we're all going to get together and just do something meaningful to us. For all of us who created this space as we move on. To move forward and release with love. Remember we talked about transitions? We have to honor the transition. We have to grieve. Yeah, we have to grieve leaving it, and we have to welcome the new space and the new step. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's what we're going to do. So, We think about those things that lead to suffering, and we just consciously try to release them. We just stop thinking them. Yes?
Well, for me, sometimes what I've noticed is when my energy is going in a negative place, then I'm resisting. And so, I mean, it just happened yesterday where, I don't know, I thought of something that occurred years ago. I started playing the tapes. And so then I started praying to surrender it. And I kept praying for the willingness to surrender it. And then after a while, it released. I asked for God's path and, you know, what it was about me or something like that. I don't even know that I know what it was about me, but all I know is that in praying for the willingness to surrender it, it released.
But that's
and then I
wonderful.
wasn't burdened with it.
Yeah. And it probably won't be back. I mean, or you may need to do it again.
If it does, sometimes I can surrender and sometimes I have very little willingness to surrender it. Because,
Yeah.
you know, because sometimes it might be hard for me to just tell myself to stop thinking about it because my emotional attachment is there.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Well, that goes back to it's attachment. And, you know, we get used to playing these old tapes. But see, what's wonderful about that is if you couldn't do it, you at least said, let me be willing.
Yeah, somebody taught me that.
Yeah, that's great.
It's very powerful.
Yeah, if I can't take that step, let me be willing to take that step. It's like that book Anne Lamott wrote, Help, Thanks, Wow, the 300 prayers, or Help, Thanks, Wow. No, seriously. Sometimes, and you know, it seems like every sermon I get up here and tell you all what a horrible week I've had, so I'm going to stop doing that. But sometimes you just say, help.
Yeah.
Yeah. I found myself doing that the other day. I was walking my dog and I just looked up at the sky and I said, help. You know, sometimes that's the best step. Just being willing.
I often ask for guidance. I
Yeah.
just ask God for guidance, and I ask God for other people to guide them, like my kids and stuff.
Yeah.
And that works.
Yeah.
Especially if you go to sleep asking that.
That's what I do. That's what I do because you all know I have a son who has a lot of legal problems. Well, he's back in jail. And so what I do is every night I ask the angels to go to him. One on his front, one on his side, one on his, just go. And I figure they can handle it. But it's the same thing, just asking for help. I love that comment about just being willing. Yeah, that's entirely true.
I think a lot of times we think we can control things and we really can't. And that's the problem. Solely on trying to control and we always say we really can't. So if we ask for help earlier,
Yeah.
at least it acknowledges that our soul knows.
Yeah, because there's really so little we can control. Yeah. But that's what you were saying, Cindy, about the attachment. We're just attached to things coming out a certain way when we have no control over how they're going to come out.
We like to think that we can control things, and we're really not in control of anything.
We're in control of very little. We're in control of how we act toward each other.
And how we respond.
And how we respond. Yeah, we're in control of how we act with love toward each other. As Mother Teresa, this is one of my favorite quotes of Mother Teresa, it's actually later in my talk, there goes this talk, is, we cannot do great things, we can only do small things with great love. Yeah, we're in control of that. That's what you did when you were sitting in the cancer, in the cancer office, just sitting there being a point of willingness to talk to that lady. How many people would she have sat next to where she did not get the energy that she could speak? But you're so loving, and you're so present, and you're so open, that she just knew it was safe. So you were just a point of love and light in a not so big way, but in a huge way for her.
She was more worried about her son than she was about the cancer.
Yeah.
And to be present with her really was a gift.
Yeah, to both of you. You know, it's funny, I was telling some folks that yesterday I was working on this talk, and I had a kid, my mother has Alzheimer's, and she lives in the house across the street from me, and we had a caregiver all set up for her to come in, a new lady, who naturally texts me at 8:10 and says she's not coming. Okay, so time time to breathe, time to practice all my principles, which don't include screaming at the dog. But, okay, so I spent all day yesterday over at my mother's taking care of her and also working on this. And it was so funny because, you know, in between making her lunch and washing her and cleaning her and moving her, I'm thinking, I gotta write a talk about love. What am I missing? Mom, just stop! I gotta go write a talk about love, please. I'll make you lunch later. It's not hard. You just have to get up and do it. It's so simple. That's why, you know, they say, you always give the same talk. It's so simple. We just step out in love every day. That's what we try to do. It's not that hard. One of my favorite books is Jack Kornfeld's A Path with Heart. Does anybody know that book? Yeah, it's a great book. And what he does is, in the very beginning of the book, he's got a chapter called Did I Love Well? And what he does is he invites people to consider those acts in their lives which they consider to be good deeds. And he did it so that he could teach them about the simple but luminous and eternal nature of loving acts. So what he did is he's a Buddhist. He follows the Buddhist path. He's a Buddhist. So what he does is he adopts the idea in Buddhism that one way to reflect on your life is to contemplate your death. Have you ever done that? I have. I mean, I say sometimes you sit down and you write your own obituary. What do I want people to remember about me? What do you want people to remember about you? How many people do you want coming to your funeral? I mean, seriously, just stuff like that. So he invites people to contemplate their lives, to think about, and I invite you to do that, to think about for a minute the transitory nature of life. We're all going to die, we just don't know when. But this body is a very delicate, brief thing. So we just sit for a minute and sit in that at some point we're all going to die. So what do we want those who are still here to remember about us? What do we want to have left? Yes, Sydney.
My husband was going through a tough financial time. And he's finally, the way he got moved out of it, he said, he finally was looking at his tombstone, and he said, do I want to have written on it, he had a good credit rating.
Yeah.
And that's how he got out of it.
No.
That's exactly what you're talking about.
No. No. That's excellent. So what he invited people to do, and I invite you to do it right now, and maybe for those who want to, we can just share it, is think about one or two good deeds you've done in your life. Let's just take a minute and think. What are one or two good deeds that you've done in your life? And if you want to share when you're ready, just raise your hand. Tasha.
I guess when I'm hearing you talk, I can only think of one, but
I think one was singing that song.
what strikes me is that I remember this one girl who reconnected with me on Facebook in the last 4 or 5 years, and I'd forgotten she ever existed, but she made a nice comment about some things, how I had treated her when we were in high school, and I didn't snub her. It was about music stuff. And that was really important to her because she was different, you know, an unusual person. And so hearing you talk, I think for me it would be that I show up in such a way that in small ways that maybe I don't even know, somebody would say, I remember one time when.
Yeah.
It's the little tiny things that make such a huge difference for people. And people are always watching. People will come up and be like, tell you things that you don't even remember, that you have no idea. And that's when I realized you're always on.
Yeah. People are always watching small things, just not snubbing someone. Denise.
I like
I'd say being a good mother. And then the other thing is with the seniors, putting a smile on and a twinkle in their eyes and a smile on their face on many, many seniors' faces.
Yeah.
So I just love them all so much.
And on ours too.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, now how important is that? Being a loving presence for people who are going through very tough changes, who are seeing their own ability diminish. I mean, I know just looking at my mother, it's so hard to have her daughter have to care for her, to not be able to do what it is she wanted to do. I mean, yesterday, my sister came over. My mother has guardrails on her bed now. My sister came over, and I had forgotten to put the guardrail up, so I hear a noise in there, and my mother, who can't even walk anymore, is struggling to get out of bed and is almost flat on the floor because she just wanted to get up and see how my sister was. I mean, think about that. I mean, that's love in action right there. Okay, anybody else? I know we have so many good deeds in this room. Linda?
Well, I think I get a lot of opportunities, but one of my best friends, her mother lives next door to her, and she's the caregiver for her mother, and mother is now in a wheelchair and in a similar condition. Can't walk, can't do her own shopping. And she's got a really busy job as the branch manager of the entire recruitment. And she's very busy. She has to meet workers, daytime workers at 4 o'clock in the morning and sign them in and take care of all of her people. So she was crying about 2 weeks ago when she called me. She said, I just can't keep up with it. My house is filthy, my mother's house is filthy. And so I said, well, I'll take care of it, and I'll hire a maid to come clean her house.
Yeah.
So what it does for me is when I can give like that, it makes them happy, which in turn makes me really happy.
Yeah, that's just a loving, giving act.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Gay.
On Wednesday mornings, I go to assisted living on Johnson's Ferry, and I read to the people. I read the very end of the daily journal, which is a conservative paper, which is good. And,
Now that's an act of love.
I like it. And I tell them all kinds of stories about my life, and I can tell them over and over because they can remember. It's the only place I go where I'm not the oldest person. So one of the few places. So anyway, but they enjoy it, and I enjoy it, and we laugh, and they say thank you when I leave, and it's really fun. I'll tell them stories about movies I've seen, and I mean they're just yeah. And like I said, some of them fall asleep, but then they wake up. And we gotta be sure they're going to wake up.
We do that too.
Yeah. And sometimes I read boring things. I read this day in history that's in the American and stuff. And so I say, who was around in 1642?
No, Mr. Smith, that's not you.
Exactly. But anyway, it's fun, and I think they enjoy it too.
Okay, great. Anybody else? Sydney?
The gals will get this, guys may not. I bought some inexpensive pantyhose, and you ever get the package of it, and you get one that doesn't have the elastic in the waistband. And I was working over at Northside Hospital in the accounting department, and I had one of those pairs of pantyhose, and I had boots on and a long skirt. But I was sneaking around behind filing cabinets trying to get the pantyhose back up, and it kept rolling down, and finally it was down above my knees, right on top of my boots. So I'm kind of walking like this, and I walk into where my boss was.
Are you kidding us this?
I know the gals can relate to this. And I walked in, and my boss was in absolute tears. She just had her head down, and she was crying, and she said, "This is the worst day I've ever had." And I said, "Well, I'm having a pretty tough day myself." And I pulled up my skirt, and she saw the pantyhose, and she went from tears to absolute shrieks. And she said, "You're right, you win." Because she shifted her energy just like that. She went from absolute tears to just shrieks of laughter. And it was one of those days I'm very proud of because
And you didn't fall.
I didn't fall, but
noticing about all these things? Does it involve anybody closing a big deal or making $1 zillion? No. No.
Well, I'd actually like to share the story of a girlfriend of mine. She had a near-death experience, and during that time, she saw things that she never would have thought were important in this life. And one of them was when she was in an airport and she was rushing to go to catch her plane. And there was this little boy there, and the little boy was crying. And there was a man from the airport trying to soothe the boy so that he could call for the parents on the microphone. Well, my girlfriend stopped, and she put her arm around the little boy, and the little boy calmed down, and the man was able to call for the parents. It didn't take very long at all. Once he calmed down, she went on to catch her flight.
Yeah.
She made a flight. That was the thing. So she went on. In her near-death experience, she saw that scene of her putting her arm around the little boy. And then she saw another scene of the little boy in a nursery school, and there was a little girl next to him crying, and he put his arm around the little girl. And it went on from there, the ripples went on, and that's what she saw in her death experience.
Wow. Thank you for that. Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah, it is. Give me that Kleenex. No. Yeah, it does. Ripples go on. And these are small things. These are just touching other people. I remember once my mother and I were, this is my mother's act, not mine. We were driving from point A to point B. I was just a kid, and it was raining. And there was an accident over by the side of the road, and my mother pulled over. And she stood there in the rain, comforting those people until the ambulance didn't know them, but just pulled over and stood there comforting them. And I have always remembered that. Just not, not changing the world, not curing cancer, even though that would be wonderful. Just stepping out, simple acts of love and community and contact. We can all do that every day and right now.